softball is behind, but there's a lot of data out there on the baseball side that is still very applicable to softball.
Welcome to the Car Ride Home podcast. What an honor today. I'm joined by Rachel Folden, former teammate of mine, which I love to be able to say, by the way. So Rachel was a 4-time All-American at the University of Marshall. You left Marshall with 6 career records, all offensive, shocker. Played 5 years in the NPF, won all kinds of awards, including Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year in 2011, which I can only imagine the names because that's after Team USA and everybody came back. So you won Offensive Player of the Year when Natasha Watley and Caitlin Lowe and Jessica Mendoza and Stacey May and all of them were in the league. 2-time national champion, founded Folden Fast Pitch, and super cool, you are currently the minor league hitting coordinator for the Chicago Cubs and the co-hitting coach for the AAA Chicago Cubs team. Did I get it all correct?
Yes. You brought up some stuff I forgot about too. So yes, the titles are correct. Good job.
I think the moral of the story is Rachel could hit and she can coach hitting very well. So we're going to dive into a lot of that and talk some baseball and softball synergies. But first, we're in the car ride. So I always set the stage with the car and the very important questions. You're in charge. What kind of music are we listening to, Folden?
We are going to play some R&B and some hip hop because that's where my soul lives. So anything with some soul to it, that'll get the goosebumps going in the car. I'm down.
What did you listen to pregame back in the day?
Same stuff. I'm pretty chill. I was never really and you played with me, I was never I have to get super pumped up or I have to shut down and go into my corner and listen to music. I honestly get my energy from people. I'm a true extrovert. So it's really just background stuff so that I could chat with the girls, honestly.
That's fair. Next, most important question for softball. Where are we eating?
Ooh, I'm a sucker for good Mexican food. I have the luxury of living in Phoenix, so I can go to Scottsdale and eat basically what people would eat in Vegas. So there's a lot of good restaurants here, but I'll go with anything in a tortilla, probably.
Hey, can you go back to the travel ball days? What was your post-game meal in the car ride home after?
Let's see. I was the most unhealthy kid, so it was probably some form of takeout or Taco Bell or something, which Taco Bell still slaps, so I don't care. I will go down. I will die on that hill. But yeah, I was not a super healthy kid. It was usually eating for convenience. I also have divorced parents, so it was usually a long car ride home or to someone else's house or something. So it was just very, very unhealthy.
Same on the takeout here and Taco Bell. Okay, speaking of that and your parents, we call this a car ride home because we did as kids, as adults, as pro players, college players, spend a lot of time in the car. So if you can think back in your career, when I ask you what's the most memorable car ride home, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Oh, geez. Memorable car ride home. To be honest, my parents were really cool. I was the youngest in my family, so I didn't get a lot of and my mom doesn't understand sports. So a lot of it was just having fun on the way home. And my mom is so good at it. And my dad was good at it too. My dad would talk about the game if I wanted to talk about it, but he was real calm and just my dad is incredibly smart, knows a ton about baseball. But yeah, I just never really had I don't have a bad memory of a car ride home. I can tell you I was kind of a drop-off kid. So both my parents worked and again, they're divorced. So I had a lot of teammates take me to places. And I can remember some very memorable car rides home with who was my best friend at the time, Megan Booth, and her dad. He was our coach and he would take us everywhere. And her and I had a lot of fun in the backseat of his truck for sure.
They can be fun car rides too, but that's a good point. How many kids grow their parents are working and their parents can't take them. So that happens quite a bit as well. You grew up Southern California, correct? So take me back, that first entry to the sport. Was it softball? Was it baseball? What did it look like back then for you? How'd you get started?
It's definitely baseball. And I started playing when I was probably 5, of t-ball like everybody else. And then my dad was the coach for a couple years. And then as I got older, I played baseball until majors. So I got to play, I think I played till I was 12. And then I quit because I wanted to devote most of my time to playing basketball. That was my best sport as a kid. And I always loved baseball. I would play outside with my brother all the time. And my basketball coach was actually the one that asked me to play softball. And I told him no because I thought softball was the dumbest sport of all time because I played baseball and I was like, baseball's the sport and softball is just kind of like knockoff baseball. That's honestly how I thought about it as a kid. And he basically said, he's like, yeah, you're probably not very good anyway. And I was like, all right. So that was all I needed. And then I went and played on his team and he was my coach until I left for college. So it was just honestly on like some dumb dare, to be honest, to play the sport. And then I think what I loved about it was everybody looked like me. I'm playing baseball. It's you being the only girl. It draws a lot of attention. And when I went and played softball, everybody looked like me and everybody was like, going through the same things as me. And I just found these like, lifelong friends and I loved it. And it's funny because now I'm the only female again on a baseball field, but I'm better equipped to handle it now. So that's good.
Brought you back. Did you know, because I did the same thing. I grew up playing baseball with the boys and then switched, I think in high school. Did you notice a difference? Or did you just, hey, I'm a kid and I'm playing and softball is kind of the same? But did you notice any difference back then of when you made the switch from baseball to softball?
Yeah, I think where to me, like the biggest difference was like defensively. Boys, I think just because they grow up with a smaller ball, their throwing mechanics are better, their hands are better. They're also like, they grow up emulating their favorite big leaguer, like you and I did probably. We didn't grow up with like softball heroes not yet. We were, there just wasn't a ton of them. And so for me, it was always growing up and trying to like emulate my favorite big leaguers. And boys do that because they see them on TV and they look like them. And so I think like defensively and throwing, I remember when I switched to softball, I was way ahead of softball players that way. Hitting wise, obviously it took a little bit of getting used to, but I think defensively, you could just see that I was far and away better than everybody else when I switched just because of the way boys are taught to do things, to be honest. I think it's changing now, which is great, or it has changed. But yeah, that was the biggest difference. How about for you?
I would definitely say that my defensive skills, like I could throw. I remember even honestly getting to A&M and we had girls that I think didn't throw very well and had shoulder issues. And I would attribute it to playing with a smaller ball and playing with the boys. I just was super aggressive. That was never questioned. Like I was very competitive and very aggressive and probably does come from playing with the boys.
Yeah.
I didn't know any different on hitting. I never had a hitting coach. So if you put it in my head, then I would think about it, but it was never put in my head. So it was just like, oh, I have a bat, like go hit the ball.
Yeah, I was kind of the same way. Like it's funny how I've actually given this presentation before. It was like I found my house on Google Earth. And so I've like seen it from the satellite view and there's these two telephone poles that like flank my yard. And we used to play, again, Southern California, you can play all year round, winter break, summer break, whatever it is. And I'd go outside and play with my brother and we had like a chalk strike zone on the garage door. And these two telephone poles, one was in like straightaway right field, not quite like the right field line, but would have been like straightaway right field. And the other one was like where the left field line would be. So there was no right field line. And we only got points if you hit it like over the house across the street. So for like my entire childhood, I learned how to hit the ball in the air and middle or opposite field. And if you look at like my spray chart when I played, it's like it matched. So it's like I just grew up in like the right situation. And my brother was a good baseball player and he's 4 years older than me and he threw really hard so I could handle good pitching. And it's just like, so I think I've never thought about my swing, which is funny because I'm a hitting coach now. I never thought about my swing. It was mostly just about like trying to accomplish a task of hitting the ball in the air, hitting it really hard. And every once in a while it would be like directional focus.
It's so interesting. You know where my head went is playing center field against you and shading over towards, like, I'm seeing your swing and what your spray chart would be. It does match. Tell me the journey. I don't know if I've ever asked you this story, but you go from California. I'm assuming you got into the travel ball scene and you end up at Marshall and have an incredible career, but at a mid-major, right? How did you go from California all the way over? Marshall's in West Virginia. How did you get there? What'd that journey look like?
I started getting attention from, again, like I have no one in my family to like emulate the model off of. Like I was the first one to get recruited to do anything, so I was really just like didn't know what I was doing. And I started to get letters in the mail from a few schools, Marshall being one of them, and it was after like a travel ball tournament in Vegas. And so Marshall was like on me pretty hard, and the rest were like Division II schools in California, like UC San Diego back when they were Division II, and Cal State Bakersfield, I think, back when they were Division II. They were sending me stuff, and Marshall was sending me stuff. And then I got the only other Division I school that had interest was UC Riverside, and it was like 10 minutes from my dad's house. And like when I was growing up, Riverside was like kind of in the desert, and like LA's just exploded, obviously, right? But like it was like kind of in the desert, and I was just like, I really don't want to go to school here, and I don't want to be close to home. I wanted to go away to school. And so Marshall was just the best option at the time. And I fell in love with their coach, with Shonda. And you know Shonda, she coached in the NPF, and like she's just the greatest person ever. And I knew it right away, and I wanted to play for her. So I went on a visit, and it was just like game over. I was like, this is so cool. It was like a college town. There's nothing in West Virginia aside from the, West Virginia University and Marshall University, and nothing in between them. And so I loved it that it was just like the college shut down on Saturdays for football games, and I got the whole college town experience. Probably not as big as College Station, but, on a much smaller scale, that was what I was looking for. And I just fell in love with it, because we don't have that in California. We don't have like small town unity in California. It's like everything is just like so spread out,
The college experience, like a college town, is real. That's what, at A&M, every restaurant you go to, there's memorabilia in there. Like the entire town is painted that color. I would imagine at Marshall it was too.
Yeah. I mean, again, much smaller scale. We don't have a 12th man, and we don't have the stadium that you guys have and all that stuff, but the unity you could definitely feel.
You do have Randy Moss.
We do. Yeah, he went there.
Okay, so think about, I don't know if you've thought about this, but you're a 4-time All-American at Marshall, and I know the roster too, and your head coach. Like that team was very, very good. Can you imagine what it would be like today, especially in the world of the transfer portal? And I can only imagine the NIL deals and the calls you would be getting coming out of Marshall to some of the bigger schools. Like, what do you think? Like, would you have taken those calls, or like if you could go back in time?
I would love to sit here on this platform and say no, that I wouldn't have taken them. But the truth of the matter is I grew up pretty poor. And had I had a chance to put some money in my pocket, I probably would have done it, to be honest. I don't fault the athletes for doing that either. I think get it while it's still available. You know what I mean? I think at some point it's probably going to get limited or go away. It's already starting to. But if you have a chance to go make money, go make money. I think I probably would have done the exact same thing, because I gave lessons while I was while I was playing in college. I would give lessons for like some side money, because I legitimately remember this. My dad and my stepmom would put $25 into my account every month, 25 or $50, something like that. And that was all I had other than my meal card to like go out and have fun with and eat. So like I had no cash. I had nothing. I just was like, I showed up and played softball every day and went to class. So I probably would have taken some pretty big, especially if like UCLA called, I would have been like, I'm gone. See you later.
Your name would have been all over the place there too, because you were amongst all the leaders and winning All-American. So I can only imagine. I'm with you too, by the way. I am always curious, and I watch you as a player and the confidence that you exuded as a player. And I don't think we got to play each other in college, but I did play against you for 3 years in the NPF. And you came from a mid-major school, but you won Rookie of the Year. So obviously had a great season in your very first year. End up getting Offensive Player of the Year while you're there. You're an all-star every single year that you're in the NPF. Did you play with a chip on your shoulder, or did that matter to you? Like, what was your thought process of representing Marshall when you were in the pro league?
Yeah, in college, I played with a huge chip on my shoulder. I felt really slighted by not getting recruited by bigger schools. And so every time, and Shonda was great at setting up preseason tournaments. We'd go to University of Georgia, and we went to UNLV and played in Vegas against some big teams. And we always played against big teams. We'd go to Alabama, And every time I stepped into that stadium, I was like, you should have recruited me. Here's what I'm going to do. And I tried to, like, legitimately, I was such a cocky kid. I've had to learn how to be humble now, but it was good for me as an athlete, right? Like, such a cocky kid, but I would, like, every time we would go play like a preseason tournament, I was like, we're not leaving this park until I homer in this park. And every time we would go, I tried to homer in every single park that I played in. And then when I got to the NPF, I think most of it was just about, like, yeah, there probably at the beginning, I would say, was showing what I can do. I think it's just, I like solving problems and I like being competitive, and that presented like a new challenge. And so I quickly figured out, like, this is something we talk about in baseball, is like, pitchers are so nasty, right? But like, your number one starter, like, you're only going to see him once a series, maybe twice if he pitches Tuesday, Sunday. And when we were in the NPF, like, you would get like Kat on the first day of the series, you'd get her on the third day of the series, and then she might come in relief on the last game of the series. And it's like, so I'd have to face the ace 3 times. And so I've quickly figured out, like, if I squeak out a hit against this pitcher and help, like, the team, whatever, just do a job that day, then that's success. But, like, I'm going to hammer the number 2 and number 3 starters. Like, those girls I'm going to go 3 for 3 off of, 4 for 4 off of. And that was, to me, where I would feast. And that would give me a little bit of confidence going into facing like a Monica Abbott or a Kat Osterman. And thankfully, I never had to face Jenny Finn. She was only on my team, which was huge. So, yeah. But like, that was kind of how I approached it. It was more so like just solving problems in the pro league more than that chip. But in college, I played with such a chip on my shoulder. It's crazy.
It makes sense. I remember, and by the way, I'm going on record saying whenever I get asked the question of the best hitters that I've ever seen, it's Rachel Folden and Stacey May. And I remember you had this presence, Folden, when you're in the box. Actually, it probably started before that. When you walked to the plate and when you were in the box, you were the most confident hitter I've ever seen in my life. There was just some swagger. There was confidence. Was that intentional? Where did that come from? Because I think a lot of young hitters could learn from you too, just honestly by, like, you were winning at bats before a pitch was even thrown, in my opinion.
That's interesting. I've never heard anybody tell me that. But I definitely know what you mean, just because, like, that's just my personality as a player. To be honest, I attribute that to 2 things. The first thing is my parents gassed me up when I was a kid. And if any parents are listening to this, I think it's really important to just, like, telling your kids, like, I love to watch you play, and telling them how awesome they are. And it's like the simplest things. Like, my mom used to tell me when I was a kid that I was prettier than Cindy Crawford, and she would tell me that, like, every day. And so I grew up thinking, like, I am hot, like, I am good looking, and I carried myself that way. And because I believed it, because she believed it. And so I think when I started to go and play, and again, I didn't have any pressure from my parents of performance. So it was really just, to me, playing the game was my opportunity to be the best at something. And so I really took that as, like, I enjoyed that part of it, right? I enjoyed the competition. And like you said, it's just like watching like a UFC fight or a boxing match. When they get into the ring, there's like this persona change. And I think, not that I think I put on like a persona by any means, but it was just like, I enjoyed it. And so to me, it was like the epitome of just going in and being able to show what I could do best.
I could see that. Like, if I'm thinking back to watching you, you had fun playing the game too. And it really did. It looked like it came easy.
It wasn't easy, but definitely wasn't easy. But I did have a lot of fun. And yeah, I don't think I ever really, like, I can't remember a time where I'm sitting in my room with my head in my hands saying I suck and, like, oh my gosh. It was just like every day I got to the ballpark, I'm like, I get to play softball today. What a freaking treat. And that was just how I approached it.
I love that. The fact you said my parents gassed me up. Like, that's what you just said, I think is so powerful for anybody listening, for parents. That matters. I feel like, especially for a young girl, it matters so much too.
So much. I think, I did this early on as a coach, right? I don't have kids, but I did this early on as a coach. Is like, sometimes you put your coaching goggles on and you search for things that are wrong. And it's like, what I need to fix. You look for, like, the stuff that's lacking, and instead of praising the things that are good. And the longer I coach, the more powerful I realize it is to catch my players doing it right versus always coming in when they're doing something wrong. It's like, hey, that 3-2 pitch that you took, that's freaking awesome. You've been working so hard on that. And I just want you to know, like, that's what it looks like. And they can go and watch it and they feel so good, like, yes, I did it, versus like, why did you swing at that? Or something like that. It's really easy to point out the flaws, but I think if we can frame things, and I learned this just from the way I was raised, like if we can just catch them doing it right, I think that's where the power is, to be honest.
Well, I think this is a great segue then to, we talked about you as a hitter and being one of the best ever, to now being a coach. And it's so freaking cool what you are doing. And for anybody who doesn't know, Rachel is, I'm going to say it, you're the highest ranking female coach in Major League Baseball, but is working with now the AAA level, has been in the Cubs organization since 2019, if I'm correct. Can you talk about, like, what did that journey look like of going to coach these men, male hitters, and into now where you're at in the Chicago Cubs organization?
I mean, thankfully I had like a really normal hiring process. Started kind of collaborating my Folden fast pitch with a company called Elite Baseball. The president of Elite Baseball he was consulting for the Cubs at the time, and then he got hired as the director of hitting. They needed to fill minor league coaches. He encouraged me to apply because what the industry in general was looking for, but specifically the Cubs, was someone who knew how to use all the technology, who could actually coach and interpret the data. And I had experience with it. So they put me in the hitting lab. I started out there. I was just basically, my job was to run the hitting lab and to be a fourth coach for our rookie ball team, which in baseball, a fourth coach is just basically like, we hit fungos, we throw BP. We don't really have like a specific set of like a group of players that we're in charge of. We just kind of help. Right. And so that was my intro to baseball, and it was going to be at rookie ball, which at the time, I think we were playing 80 game seasons. And then the first season got washed out due to COVID. Then they shortened it. And so in 2021, literally like probably a month or less before spring training started, our hitting coach, who was supposed to be like the hitting coach on my team, and I was going to be kind of like his assistant hitting coach, but still a fourth coach. He ended up having some sort of family issue. He's not from the United States, so he stayed home with his family. And so all of a sudden I was the hitting coach. And it was like, just, yeah, Rachel can do it. She'll handle it. She knows how to do everything. And like, if I have any strengths whatsoever, it's that I'm detailed, I'm organized, and I'm pretty good communicator. So like, I could at least have people help, and they would always know what's going on, and I could keep them in the loop and keep my hitters organized and things like that. And so I just learned and, fell on my face a lot. You realize in baseball, it's funny because I came from, giving lessons, and everybody walks in and they give you money and they say, coach my kid. And so you have automatic buy-in when you get in there, right? But in baseball, those players did not choose me as their coach. They got drafted and they said, here's your coach for this season. And so you have to build relationships and you have to get buy-in from these players. And that was like a completely new experience for me. And, because at first I just wanted to come in hot and coach everybody and just be like, hey, try this, try this, try this. And these players are looking at me like, who the hell are you? And why are you telling me to do this? I'm a professional baseball player. I'm pretty good already. And it's like, so I had a little bit of like, knock me off the pedestal of coach. And you realize in baseball, you're just basically in service to the players. Like in what you do, you see college coaches and travel ball coaches, and they are the entity, they are the thing, right? That everything revolves around. And then the players end up playing for them. It's like, it's an honor to go play for this coach in, softball or travel ball. But when you get to professional baseball, it's like the players are the thing. Like all we care about is the players and cultivating and developing these players. So we become in service to the players. So it's like a flip-flop system where it's the players are up here and the coaches are down here, versus in softball where the coaches are everything. And so I think that was, or college baseball even too. So I think that was what I had to learn the most, is just being in service to the players. And, once you get that mindset, it's like, even if I was to go back and coach college softball, I think I would still have that mindset. Just because I think it's so powerful to like, especially right now, there's an epidemic going on where it's like, if any player has any sort of success, they just end up going to another school because another school offers them more money. And so it's like, if you can at least somewhat build that relationship with the player, and you might keep more of your players, especially at like a mid-major or a school that's like fringy, like right on the cusp of like being a Power 5, powerhouse. So I think it's just really, really important. And I think that was my biggest learning curve, was just learning how to be in service to the players, and also like learning how to exist. Baseball's a corporate structure. So like learning where things fall in. I have bosses. I'm a hitting coach of my AAA team, but I have hitting coordinators that I have to answer to and directors that I have to answer to. And we're all part of this big corporation. And so it took me a minute to learn that part too. But once you get into that and everything goes away, you're just coaching.
There's so many things, just life things of what you just said. I want to read a quote. This is from, speaking of bosses, this is from the Cubs director of hitting, Justin Stone. Her ability to get the most out of her players is why we tabbed her for our staff. So your ability to get the most out of players, to me, that goes into building relationships and getting their buy-in. So, and I'm sure you probably didn't even think about this, right? But not only are you going in and it's all about the players, but you're also a female. So how did you, what exactly did you do to get that buy-in and to build the relationships, especially at the beginning?
I just love them, to be honest, care about them, ask about stuff that has nothing to do with baseball. Hey, how's your wife doing? Congratulations on your baby. What'd you do this weekend? How'd you sleep? Just asking them stuff that has nothing to do with baseball, but genuinely caring about them. It can't be fake. They know, players know, just like kids know when someone is just not being genuine with them. And so you just have to love them. I think that's the number one thing. And I also too think that baseball's very diverse. There are players that come from different countries, different backgrounds, socioeconomic and ethnically, right? And so being able to just have respect for everybody, I think it's funny because I get the question a lot about do the players care that you're a woman? And the honest to God answer is I've never felt it from the players. They don't care. If anything, they respect me more for it, just because they know that I've probably gone through it at some point in my life, right? And so we just kind of have that understanding there. But yeah, I think you just have to love them. You have to genuinely care about your players, and they feel that. And when players know that their coaches care about them, they'll do everything for them.
I'm curious because you have so many different hitters at different stages, and I'm sure because it is corporate structure, maybe, hey, we got a lot of money invested in this guy. How do you balance that as a hitting coordinator in working with all the different hitters on your team and the different personalities?
Yeah, and that is a thing. If you were drafted in the first or second round and you got a lot of money, the organization tends to pay more attention to those guys. My job as a coach, boots on the ground, is to treat everybody the same. And maybe not the same, but to treat them all equally, I guess. You never treat anybody the same, but to treat them all equally and give them the same amount of attention and the same amount of love. And because the reality of it is and I could probably pick out 4 or 5 guys in our organization where I'm he's definitely a big leaguer. He's definitely a big leaguer. He's definitely a big leaguer. But the rest of them is to be honest, I really don't know. And I don't think the organizations really know either. I think they have in their heads who they want to be up there. Obviously, they want to see returns on their investment. I get all that. But my job is to just coach them all like they might all be big leaguers. And so prepare them for, the next level, or prepare them for now in AAA, it'll be preparing them for the big leagues. AA was kind of the same thing too, but it's just about meeting them where they're at and getting them to whatever their next step is. Because the thing that I've learned in this business is something that I've never had before is I have help. I'm surrounded by amazing hitting coaches that it doesn't have to be me that does the thing anymore, right? So it's if I prepare them and send them on to the next level, now it's that coach's responsibility to build the relationship and to coach that player. And my job is just to communicate the coach everything I know about the player. But it's such a cool process being in professional baseball because I don't have to do everything by myself at all. And I have so much help. And that's something that for me, and you can ask my girlfriend this, I struggle asking for help. So to be able to have it at my disposal and learning how to use it has been monumental in my, not only my players' development, but also professionally in my development too.
That's interesting. I'm curious when you said okay, I can tell this guy's going to be a big leaguer. From a hitting perspective, what is it? What makes you say I can tell that person's gonna make it?
For me, there's a couple things. Number one, they never look fooled. Yeah. They never look like they're off time, and they look like the game never speeds them up. I would say that those are 3 big things. And if you can see someone who like kind of like turns it on and has a little bit of like, I don't know, like a little bit of fire in them when, you know, the game is on the line, that matters too. Those guys usually tend to be the guys that end up playing in the big leagues too, that can play in the biggest moments. But yeah, I think most of the time you just look at like, especially even like at rookie ball, we'd get guys at 18 years old and they're just like spitting on nasty pitches. Like it's nothing to them. And you're just like, that's something that the next guy that comes up to the plate is going to swing at 3 pitches that are nowhere near the strike zone because he doesn't know any better, but you just know how to take a professional at bat already. And I think that usually is the thing that I look for, is just the game just never speeds them up. They never seem to get anxious. They never seem to get like down on themselves. It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. They know that every time they go to the ballpark, they've got a chance to do something special, and they just have that thing.
If I heard you correctly, you didn't mention anything about mechanics or like their particular swing. It sounds like approach and mental. So if I'm a young hitter, how do I work on that?
Put yourself in environments that don't have anything to do with the swing. Like we were talking about kind of off camera a little bit before this started. You know, the way I learned how to hit was my brother would pitch to me, and he's 4 years older and he threw pretty hard. He would pitch to me and we'd play against our garage, and I had to hit. The only way we could like score against each other was to hit the ball in the air and up the middle, basically. And so for my entire childhood, I'd take, 500 at bats a summer playing against my brother, and all I would focus on is hitting the ball past him and up the middle because it had to be a fair ball. And so that made my swing organize into a way that allowed me to do it. And I never thought about my swing. And I do think mechanics are important. Like there's some absolutes that we kind of know now just because we have technology to kind of confirm or deny certain things. But to be honest, that list is really small. I think a lot of people think that there's like this huge list of things that like make a good hitter from a mechanic standpoint, and it's probably like 3 or 4 things, and then everything else is your ability to like do you swing the bat fast enough? Are you strong enough? Are you someone who swings at good pitches, or do you not swing at good pitches? Do you take too many pitches? Are you too passive? I think it just matters. A lot of those things matter, especially in pro baseball. Everybody's talented. Everybody can swing. So it's like you have to find those little things that separate the great players from the good ones.
Okay, I got a 2-part question. So I got it. You said there's absolutes of hitting, so I have to ask, in your opinion, what are those absolutes? And then are they the same in baseball and softball, or are they different?
Good question. They are, first of all, they're the same. The swing is the same. The perception of what is happening in an at-bat is different, though. There are more variables to account for in baseball than there are in softball. So you can sue me if you want to after this podcast, but I do think that hitting a professional baseball pitcher is harder than hitting a professional softball pitcher. And the reason I say that is because the reaction time is very similar. Obviously, you have your outliers like Monica Abbott that throws harder than anybody we would face in the big leagues. So you have your outliers like that. Let's take her out of the equation. And everybody else, the reaction time is pretty much the same. The approach angle of the ball is pretty much the same on a big league 4-seam fastball as it is on a softball rise ball, okay, which is always the thing that everybody separates. It's pretty similar, but I think going back to your question of absolutes, the first thing you have to do is you have to be able to put yourself in a position to be on time. And you have to be on time. Like there are 0 hitters that have poor timing that are like excellent baseball or softball players. So to me, you have to be on time. I think you have to have a swing that is repeatable in terms of like the way that you load. So, and that can vary, but from an absolute standpoint, it just has to be something that's repeatable. So if you're someone who can have a repeatable move with a high leg kick, then you should hit with a leg kick. If you're somebody who is highly repeatable with your foot on the ground, like I was when I hit, then you should do that. And so it's just about being repeatable. And so I think that's an absolute too. And I think there's like a couple things that can get in the way that are not 100% absolutes, but they are pretty close. And I think like we have a measurement with like, we call it being on plane, over plane, or under plane, right? And so like if you could picture like a hula hoop around your chest, right? And you're trying to swing along that arc of the hula hoop, right? If my barrel comes in over that hula hoop, that would be considered overplane. And if my barrel drops below that, that would be underplane. And so overplane hitters, they make a lot of contact, but they struggle with power because their contact point has to be so far out in front because their bat has to turn uphill eventually, right? And then an underplane hitter has a ton of swing and miss in their game. And so those players are really hard to work with. So we try our best to get players as close to planar as possible. And I would say that's not necessarily an absolute, but it's pretty close. Yeah. And I think like just making sure that everything stays stacked in the middle of your body between your feet, I think is another one too. So like keeping your head as still as possible, I think matters as well.
What role, especially because you are looking at the data and different things, what role would you say vision and pitch recognition play into hitting?
It's huge. You have to be able to see and you have to be able to recognize pitches as they come. I think we place a huge importance here on swing decisions, and I think the industry does as a whole, but I think sometimes the way that we coach it can be a little messed up. And I think when people think of like pitch recognition, they think that you have a yes or a no decision that you have to make, right? And I actually have like talked to the Cubs about this. Like for me, I don't think of them as swing decisions. I just think of them as take decisions. So for me, it's like, and this is how I hit. I think that every pitch is hittable. It's going to be hittable. And the only decision I have to make is to stop. And so if I can do that as a hitter, then that simplifies my process. If I'm caught in between, and you know this as well as I do, right? Like you've been in the box and you're like, Danielle Laurie's pitching and you're like, okay, she's going to throw the changeup. She's going to throw the changeup. And then all of a sudden she throws a fastball and you get caught of like, oh, I have to swing. And then you get caught in between and you're late. Or even if she threw the changeup, you would have been early because you weren't committed to it, right? So I think that whole training it as though we have two decisions to make, I think is where we fail as an industry. It's like, you should really only have one decision to make, and that's no. You should assume that the pitch is going to be in your area because you have to be ready to hit it when it arrives. Because if you're still deciding, you're not ready to hit it. So I think about it like that. But yeah, we basically break our hitter breakdowns into 3 categories, and it's like your ability to do damage, your ability to make contact, and your ability to make good swing decisions. And so it's 33% of the equation.
So good. How often do your players ask you about softball and ask you about the differences? Does that happen at all? I'm curious if they get interested with like your career in football.
It'll usually happen like 2 or 3 times throughout the year, just based on where I'm at. Like it'll happen once in spring training. Someone will bring it up, and there's one YouTube video on the internet that's like me hitting, and it's like a highlight video from Marshall. And so like someone will find it, and then someone will tell their buddies about it, and then they'll ask me about it. And it's like this funny thing that we do. And then it'll happen like 1 or 2 times again in like the clubhouse like later. But sometimes they'll ask me about it. For the most part, I mean, like I'm 38 years old. Like I'm pretty far removed from my career now. So I think like even the people that I've faced, like they don't even know who these people are anymore. It's just like there's not a ton of places where they like have this softball history readily available. So, people don't know who Kat Osterman is or Monica Abbott is or anything like that, like unless they went to Texas or went to University of Tennessee or something like that. And so it's interesting to like when they do talk to me about it, and I'll like tell them, and then they're like, oh, that's pretty cool. So
I feel like there'd be a respect, and even now because softball is on TV so much in the spring. So I'm curious, like, are the guys ever sitting around and there's softball on TV, and like, do they talk about the swing? And like, that's I think where I was interested too. Like, do baseball players consider the differences or the similarities in a swing?
Yeah, I get asked that question quite a bit, and they're always like so surprised to hear me say what I told you earlier. And I'm like, dude, what you guys do is harder than what I had to do. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, I thought it was so much quicker. And it's like, it's really not. It's just different. Like your perception of where the ball comes from is different. We have and every once in a while, this is usually what happens too, is we have a traject machine. Do you know what that is?
I don't.
Okay, so it's a $1 million machine. Okay,
that's probably why I don't.
Yeah, that's right. Again, I have an embarrassment of riches, but we have a few of them in our organization, and we had one last year in Tennessee when I was in AA. And so what it is it's a big like black box, and it moves. It's on a track. It moves up and down. It moves left and right. and there's a projector in front of it. The projector will project any pitcher that we put into it, and it will replicate their arsenal completely, like from the spin rate to the tilt of the pitch, from the release angle, from everything. So we can actually face a pitcher before we face the pitcher, which is awesome, right? And we
That's
can see what their shapes look like, and we can see everything. So when we have like rain delays or we have like extra time or whatever, me and the other hitting coach would just pick up a bat and hit in there. And it's like that. Then the guys will walk in, and that usually starts a conversation. And they're like, how can you hit this? And I'm like, well, I know where the ball's going. Like, if I didn't know where the ball was going, it would be really hard for me because I have no like conceptualization of like how to pick up a ball from here, only from the hip, right? So like I have my encyclopedia when it comes to hitting a softball is, 1,000 pages thick, whereas in baseball it's 10 pages, right? And it's just because of the baseball that I've watched. So it's a completely different feel. And I think that like, they'll watch me swing and miss or get like carved up, and they laugh, and we just, it's like a humbling human moment that usually starts a good conversation. But yeah, they're curious about it every once in a while. Yeah.
So you're using data, and obviously you've got access to a lot of data capture and different things. But you've also, even going back to your Folden fast pitch days and giving hitting lessons and working with individual hitters, how are you using data, interpreting data? What matters in your opinion? And especially if you're talking to youth parents and youth coaches now, because it's becoming the buzzword, right? And popular, but like what really matters when you're using data, looking at data in regards to just player development?
Good question. I think when I was running the facility at Folden Fast Pitch, I think the best way to run data in a facility and the easiest way is to have a blast sensor and to have a hit tracks or a Rapsodo, something that shows ball flight metrics, and the blast will show the swing metrics. Now, the thing that you have to do is, and you brought up a really good point, is like, what are you even looking at? Like, does it all matter? No, it doesn't all matter. Now, for some, you have to know everything though, because you will have to kind of form a combination of things that make sense for your player. And so you have to understand it so well that you can explain it in the most simple terms. So for example, if I have a player who's, if they're on blast and their VBA is really flat, right? And it's like, okay, I have to know that a flat VBA is going to play well at the top of the zone. I'm going to cover a lot of pitches at the top of the zone, but I'm really going to struggle at the bottom of the zone. And I know that as a hitting coach because I've studied it, and I'm like, what is VBA and what's good and what's bad? Well, I know that gives them a hole in their swing, but also gives them a place where they're really dominant. So now as a coach, I have a little nugget of information that I can use at my disposal, right? If a pitcher's throwing a lot of rise balls, I can walk up to the hitter and be like, hey, this is your matchup right here. Like, this is perfect for you. This is going to play right into your swing. Don't do anything different. And then if I have a player who's facing a drop ball pitcher that day, I might be more inclined to be like, hey, I need you to take more pitches today. It might be something where, hey, I need you to like lay off of it. Like, she's got to get the ball up for you to swing at it. And so that becomes like a tool that I can use. And then when I'm in the cages, it's like, hey, do you want to work on that VBA? Now we can build on it. But like, I have to know what it means. I can't just ignore it. And I think what I did this a lot as a young coach is like, if I didn't understand a metric or I didn't understand a statistic, I just wouldn't talk about it. And it's like, well, it doesn't mean it's not important. It's like, it's my duty to go and figure out what these things mean, but don't talk about them unless you understand them either. So like, because you can screw somebody up as fast, you might think you're helping them, but you could just screw them up because now they're all domed up because you don't really understand it. They're trying to figure out what the heck they're supposed to be doing. And so I think it's a double-sided coin in that regard where you can help somebody, but you can also hurt them. So I think it's about understanding, even if you only understand 2 or 3 things, understanding them so well that you can explain them simply, because the worst thing a coach can be is to understand a little bit of information, just enough to be dangerous, just enough to act like they know what they're talking about, but they don't really. And then you screw somebody up. And the best analogy I can use for this, we just went to Mexico City for vacation, and like, my mom speaks Spanish, but she didn't speak it in the house. And I coached in rookie ball in pro baseball. So I had to speak a ton of Spanish. So my Spanish is like, it's pretty good. I would say like 50%, right? I'm not fluent. Okay. But it's like pretty good. So we go to Mexico City and I will like order food in Spanish, and I can do that. And I can navigate myself in Spanish, and it's great. And then someone thinks that you can speak Spanish, and then they come and they like start having these conversations with you. And I'm like, yeah, I'm out now. And now I don't understand. And I think that's where we get as coaches sometimes is it's like, in my little bubble, I can speak enough Spanish, but then once I get out to people who actually know Spanish, I'm like, fudge, dude, this is moving too fast for me. I don't understand it. And I just wish coaches would be a little bit more like that in you don't have to act like you know everything. Just speak on the things you know, learn those other things. When you feel like you have a good grasp of them, then you can start to teach them.
Learn. That's something good. Who are you learning from? Where are you going to? Like where can coaches go to learn more?
I mean, you can do conventions. ABCA is good. From the softball world, I highly encourage more softball coaches to go to ABCA. I think it's the content is a little bit more because there's more money in baseball. The content is a little more actionable, if that makes sense. I think when I go to like NFCA conventions, sometimes, not all the time. It's gotten a lot better. And when I was there at the last one in Vegas, I was like, oh, this is legit. This is pretty cool. But I think what coaches want is they want someone to stand up there and say, hey, this is a drill that can help you. Here's how it can help you. And here's my experience, versus like talking about like concepts that are very abstract and allow you to like fill in the blanks. And I think it's just the difference between like women and men in some regards is like women is just very coaching a group of women. They love to be close to each other and they love to be like besties with each other. And that team camaraderie is so much more important. That's usually what you hear about when these people speak at these conventions. When you go to ABCA, it's like guys just like don't care, I guess, or like they just don't place as high of a price tag on it. So it's a lot more like actionable content. So I think that's really good. And I think like going to any sort of continuing education, whether it's like on base U, mortar preferences, doing all of those things, and if you have the means to do it or raising money to do it, I think those are important. And as long as you go with an open mind and you're not just like, okay, well, this is awesome, I'm only going to do this now. It's like, no, just use it as a tool, learn some new things, learn how the industry is kind of like teaching things, and just learn from the elite people. And I think what people don't realize is people like me who might seem like we're unreachable or whatever, like reach out to us, whether it's on Instagram or Twitter or whatever. Like we like to talk about our jobs. Like we enjoy this stuff. So like just reach out to us and we'll help you, and it might take a minute and it might take a week or two before we, are able to like sit down and devote time to it. But especially in the off season, like we love to do this stuff. So, reach out. That's how I learned most things is I just started reaching out to people on Twitter and texting people and just being like, hey, what do you got on this? And just you form relationships that way.
Makes sense. I'm curious, in your opinion, there's been conversation, maybe that's just internally, of baseball and softball differences in data. And is softball behind, or maybe not necessarily because it's different, but I'm curious from your perspective of where softball is at in regards to capturing data, understanding data, using data versus where baseball is at. Do you think we're behind?
Yes. And it's not to the fault of softball. It's just we're at the mercy of money. To give you an example, I have an entire R&D team that can code and come up with stuff for blast data. And I can do that from my blast data yesterday and I can have it on my desk today. So it's just from a timing standpoint, it's so much quicker. The turnover is so much quicker and we have more data because we have more players. So softball is behind, but there's a lot of data out there on the baseball side that is still very applicable to softball. Again, Blast is really generous with their information too. Like if you reach out to them and they can kind of like help you and see like, they'll talk to you about like, hey, this is where we got this data from. This is why we put a green. This is why it's in the green versus the yellow or the red or whatever. Like they'll tell you all of that stuff and it's very, very applicable. And I think a lot of people are intimidated by it, but it's out there. Like you just have to go get it. And I think with softball, what happens is the collection process and the collation process is so extensive that coaches just don't have time for it. And I don't blame them, especially not now. You got to recruit your own players now. You don't just have to go out and recruit everybody else's players. You got to recruit your own players. And so they just don't have time. So unless you have like this staff of people or you have a biomechanics department on your campus that can help you, or you have a research student that loves baseball or softball and wants to write a research project, and you're like, here's all this data, sift through it for us. Unless you have like kind of those unique circumstances, it's so time consuming that I just think that softball coaches are spread too thin, and there's not a lot of time for it. I think it's why you see a lot of it happening in the facilities before you see it happening in college. Is just because you need time.
Yeah, that's fair. So before I close this out with some quick questions, I'm going to put you on the spot. Speaking of coaching and the differences, what's the path? What's next for Rachel Folden? Is it to continue the track and be a Major League Baseball hitting coach, or in the big leagues, and I would assume be the first to do it? Or is there ever a track to come back into softball and coach? You see a lot now. I think of a lot of the hitting coaches in college softball came from baseball.
Yep.
So what is the future for you?
In the immediate future, I want to stay in baseball. Baseball allows me to be a full-time coach and only have to worry about coaching. I don't have to recruit. I don't have to I just coach, right? And I get to do the things that I like to do, which is call people and talk to them about hitting. And as much as I was obsessed with hitting as a player, I'm still just as obsessed with it. And so that's all I want to do is coach hitters. And so I'm afforded the option to do that. And until college softball becomes less recruiting heavy, I haven't considered going back into softball. I've had a couple people reach out to me and ask, but it's just not something that in the current structure of how it is that I want to do. Not that I do miss coaching women. I do miss having an impact there, but I also feel like I'm having an impact here on the men's side too. And so, it's fulfilling me in that way. As far as you asked about like coaching in the big leagues, those jobs, they're so few and far between. If something comes along and I have the opportunity to be lucky enough to either be interviewed or do that, I'm going to take it. And I think it would be an amazing opportunity and a really good challenge for me. But as far as like, I'm not so hungry to get there that I'm forgetting where I'm at right now. I really, really enjoy coaching in the minor leagues. I really enjoy my organization. The Cubs are a great organization, have treated me very well. And so I'm really good at being where my feet are right now, and I'm very happy with what I'm doing.
What's your advice? And this could go for anybody, right? Male or female, and I've been there too. When you walk into a company and you're the only woman, you're different, right? Whether it's you're younger or gender, but clearly there's not many people that look like you inside the organization. So what's your biggest advice, especially for young girls in those situations where maybe you are somebody that's different?
This is going to sound so basic, but I really believe this. Just be yourself. Like, whatever you are that you believe in as a human being, be that. And I think that will resonate more with people than anything else. If you're a little quirky, be a little quirky. Don't try to like mold yourself into what it is. And I think, women in general do that, but especially women in male dominated fields is they almost like try to fill a role or fill like a personality type that they think they need to be. And it just doesn't work that way. It's like, you just have to be yourself. People are attracted to authenticity. And I believe that. And so I think just being yourself is one of those things. I'm somebody who's not afraid to voice my opinion. I'm not afraid to disagree with people. I've always been that way. And, I'm nice about it, but I've always been that way. I've always been able to like, say, hey, actually, like, I disagree, but like, can we have a conversation about it? And that doesn't change just because I'm working in baseball, right? And I'm working with ex-big leaguers of like people whose baseball card I had, those are like my coworkers now, which is like the coolest thing. And, it's still being able to like just be myself in front of those people, I think goes a long way.
I think you're spot on. And I can speak to that too. That's exactly, there's many times, even now I work in softball, but there's oftentimes I'm the youngest still and the only female, but I think being exactly who we are. I always thank my dad, by the way, like almost probably every year for putting me in sports where I was the only girl and him never treating me different. It was always just, you're just an athlete. You're just one of the teammates there.
Yeah. And you can tell, like I watch, a lot of times when you get, there's an interview, like snippet of you talking to people, who you are right now is who you were when we played together too. Like it's very authentic. And that's why people are drawn to you. And that's why you've been able to do what you've been able to do and build what you've been able to build too. And I think that people could learn a lot from just how you conduct yourself in those rooms. You're just yourself, and you've always been that way.
I appreciate you saying that. And you're the same. That's why I giggled earlier when you're like, I will disagree. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure we've had those conversations, but very, very respectful.
Yeah.
So I got who you are nice about it. All right, favorite baseball hitter to watch, favorite softball hitter to watch currently, and why?
Ooh, currently baseball hitter to watch, Yordan Alvarez probably.
Oh, one of my Astros.
Yeah, that's right. And dude is really good. You know who I really like, who we just traded for too? I love watching Kyle Tucker hit, and we just traded for him. He's a Cub now, and I'm really excited to like watch him hit. And I would say the best BP I've ever seen, like the most electric professional batting practice I've ever seen in my entire life, is Seiya Suzuki. And I've actually thrown BP to him, and it is incredible just how the ball comes off of his bat. He'll go line to line, and everything is just perfect backspin. There's no tail on anything. There's no mishits. It's just lasers with perfect backspin from the left field line to the right field line. It's pretty impressive. So those are, Alvarez is probably my favorite to watch just because he doesn't strike out very much. He hits the ball with a lot of power, and he's left-handed, so I like all of those things. And then Tucker's just, I don't think people realize how good Kyle Tucker is. They're about to, but I don't think people realize how just really, really good he is. And then softball hitters to watch. I loved watching Alo chase and break the home run record. That was incredible. That was like stupid. I loved watching Amanda Lorenz hit. I think she still plays. She's a really, really good hitter and just can hit the ball to all fields. I like hitters that can hit the ball hard who don't strike out. I have a type. I like when hitters, you know, one of my favorite hitters to grow up watching was Albert Pujols. And fun fact about Pujols, he has more extra base hits in his career than he does strikeouts, which is like insane. So doubles, triples, and home runs, he has more of those than strikeouts, which is like ridiculous. So I love hitters that can move the ball forward and don't strike out a lot and can also hit the ball really hard. So,
speaking, you said Amanda Lorenz, she is still playing in Athletes Unlimited. I'm curious your thoughts of, hey, we went through all the struggles of the NPF as professional players. Are you paying attention? Are you excited about AUSL or professional softball? What are your opinions on pro softball?
I am very excited. I want softball to blow up. I want it to turn into, you know, the NWSL and the WNBA's success. Like there would be nothing that makes me happier, but it is a little frustrating at times to watch it just go through like the same model over and over and over again. And it's just excruciating to watch. So when, not the players, the product is incredible, but just the model of like,
always has been.
It's the same stuff that you and I dealt with, you know, where like, again, you were reading stuff and it's like my highest paid season was I made $8,000. Like that was my highest paid season. And like just stuff like that is just really hard to see, or like knowing that people go the whole season and haven't been paid yet and all that. It's just like it's the same tired thing on repeat. And so I think softball's ready for its moment to take over. We just need like a boatload of investment. And I think Athletes Unlimited is doing really good things for the sport. And I'm really excited for their league to start because I hope that it really, really takes off. From what I understand, right, like 2026 is when it's supposed to be like the city model, right, where they like put teams in cities, and like next year is supposed to be more of like a touring model. So I'm really excited to see that take off. And I hope that they pump enough money into it, like, you know, and not worry so much about pinching pennies on the backs of the players. And just, I think if we get that like billionaire investment into softball, I think it could be something really, really special.
I completely agree with you. And I think Kim Ng, who came from Major League Baseball and being involved with us will be big. So switching, I got to know, who in your opinion was the toughest pitcher you ever faced? Like, did you have a?
Yeah, Kat, I think I have 2 career hits against Kat, and I faced her a lot. So Kat owned me.
You were a lefty. That's harder.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to hit her anyways, but.
Yeah, I hit Monica pretty well, but like Kat just owned me, dude. Like gross, just gross.
She owned a lot of people.
She owned a lot of people.
Hey, fun fact, because I did not hit home runs, but I did have like, I think the only grand slam off of Kat, and I made sure I reminded her on a podcast interview as well.
That's
right. That's my claim to fame.
Who is your favorite or toughest pitcher to face?
You know who I really struggled against was Sarah Pauly. owned me.
Really?
Like owned me. And I don't know what it was. She threw pretty hard. But like being a righty, I don't know. Then it became mental and she owned
Yeah.
me.
There were a couple pitchers that I played with on the Bandits that would have owned me that I'm so happy that I never had to face.
Oh, you know who Nimitz, like she had just a nasty changeup and like weird delivery. That was hard. And then Danielle Laurie, I think her changeup was just nasty.
Yeah.
Nasty.
Lori hit me in the tricep, and that was the hardest I had ever been hit by anybody. I was like, dang, dude, she threw hard.
Hard.
She threw hard, and it was like a heavy ball too, and she hit me in the tricep, and that was like one of the biggest bruises I ever had.
I don't know if you watch her. Oh, tough. Like I'm watching her work with her daughter, and I'm like, that's the same Danielle Laurie who was in the circle against us. Like mentality hasn't changed.
Pitches like her. It's crazy. They look the same.
It's
I watch her videos on TikTok. I'm like, oh my god, they're the same build. They have that little hop at the end of their pitch. Like they do. It's the craziest thing. I'm like, oh my god, it's like the exact same person.
It's seriously. Well, okay. Last. Let's see. I asked you all my like favorite questions, but what would your advice be for others that are looking to get into baseball, especially coming from the softball world? What's your biggest advice to them?
Spend as much time around baseball people as possible. So the best way to do it, like if you're someone who if there's like a big training facility in your area, go spend some time there. Go ask them if they need help. And, or if you could like pick their brains and just go in there, once a month and just talk to them about stuff and understanding how it works. Just honestly, like just putting yourself in front of as many baseball people as possible, I think is probably the best way. And like continuing to learn in baseball spaces. So going to ABCA and making sure that you ask questions and you talk to people and, things like that, like networking that way. And then, like I said before, just reaching out to whatever baseball person you want to reach out to. Like most of them are pretty responsive. Mostly just like putting yourself out there. I think a lot of people kind of wait for these things to happen to them. And it's like there's a little bit of legwork that you have to do to kind of like introduce, hey, I would like to work in this space, because these jobs, especially like in baseball, like they're so hard to get. And every time we go through a collective bargaining agreement, the number of minor league jobs keeps getting smaller and smaller because the player pool keeps getting smaller and smaller. And so it pushes a lot of like players and coaches to like independent ball, which is another good option. Like go talk to your local indie ball team and, pick their coaches' brains. There's a lot of good coaches coaching independent ball, college baseball, like all of these things. Like just put yourself in as many of those spaces as possible and be a willing participant versus just kind of sitting around going, wow, I think that would be cool. I would like to do that, but not doing anything else above having that conversation with yourself.
Once again, good life advice, anyways, of ask questions, put yourself out there and build relationships. Well, Folden, it was so much fun as usual. I'm super proud of you. You're trailblazer. It's cool to watch. Same thing. You're still yourself, but you're impacting now the baseball world, and the softball world is following you too. So thank you for joining us.
It has been fun to watch your journey as well. And to be able to do what you've done with Alliance has been fun to watch. It's not easy to jump into a space that's been dominated by others for so long and carve out a space for yourself, but you've done a hell of a job. So it's been fun to watch. I'm very proud of you as well.
Oh, I appreciate you, friend. Well, thanks for joining us in the car ride home.